我看大家也是在这里面的也好，还有其他的，就是做个简单的一个开光僧众们也是以后僧的叫真正的了就真主安的多玛丽僧真，我们僧真刚要买上去上去多真爱为了听人们的讲话。僧真做了准备工作上一起出现转变年的，有人过去马里小时说嘎嘎嘎嘎嘎咋呀那爸爸爸妈也老外小啥叫格咋呀那爸爸爸妈老外小啥叫嘎咋呀那爸爸爸妈也老外小。爸爸爸妈也老外小啥叫嘎咋呀那爸爸爸妈也老外。嘎呀那爸爸爸妈也老外小啥叫马嘎咋呀那爸爸爸妈也老外小啥有没有达嘛也都找不完的那个的话的很多人都把都马下嘛。يقدر ما يتجرب وانت تغنى كذا وتتغنى بعدهم يقدر ما يتجرب وانت تغنى كذا وتتغنى ما شرمنا يسوع دون تندان هنجدون كراجدون جنيجون نمجدون وانجدون جون لبرصار سبجاتي جامبندر يسوع دون تندان هنجدون كراجدون جنيجون نمجدون وانجدون جون لبرصار سبجاتي جامبندر يسوع دون تندان هنجدون كراجدون جنيجون نمجدون وانجدون جون لبرصار سبجاتي جامبندر يسوع 만주름 borkai 자시쇼 양로주 조송고 자시쇼 답주점에 되기 자시 저르고송 되기 자시쇼 덤존의 장계와의 밤문로 말릭 금년가리 공방 유라뉴도 도저주 好현재 전보서던 힘이 정도는 뭐는 전보를 감지하다 밖으로 다른 감상도 싫나 돈바 특제잖아 기점사를 어느 전으로 정이 정감성 작업을 특집션로 일라 지메 분조자라 소란데 공개 또반포로 신기로
The unsurpassed, profound, and wonderful Dharma is difficulty encountering billions of aeons, and now see it here to receive it, uphold it, vow to fathom the Tathagata's true meaning, to liberate all beings, thus generate the supreme bodhicitta. Now let us begin our class on the wish-fulfilling treasury composed by Venerable Longchenpa. This text includes all of the Dharma teachings of the Sutrayana and the Vajrayana. As someone who seeks for liberation, it is quite necessary to study this text. Within this text, the outline demonstrates that at the beginning, the nature of samsara should be abandoned, and what should be accepted is the nature of nirvana. So these two are the two major outlines. In terms of the samsara that should be abandoned, then the teaching is on the first chapter, from the first chapter to the seventh. We have already completed the inanimate and animate world, as well as the whole world's formation, duration, degradation, and empty. Currently, we're talking about the nature of nirvana that should be adapted, and within which we are going to look at the path as well as the fruition. The path includes the actual path as well as the path of practice. In the 8th chapter, at the very beginning, we are going to look at a really important textual outline where it talks about the three aspects of the path that that has the listening, contemplation, and practice. In terms of the listening, there are three aspects as well. That is what to listen, how to listen, and the meaning of listening to the Dharma. At the time of studying the wish-fulfilling treasury, we are going to look at how to practice the Dharma that would lead one to nirvana. Then we need to know what is the practice. In terms of practice, there are the studying, contemplation, and then practice. So our first thing to learn over here is listening, which is corresponding to the 8th and the 9th chapter. The 8th chapter covers the from whom we should be listening those teachings. And then the 9th chapter talks about the kinds of negative influence that we should let go. And currently, we are studying on how to listen to the teachings, which is covered by the 10th and 11th chapter. All the way from the 12th chapter, it is going to cover the meaning of the Dharma. The Dharma that we listen to and the meaning of the Dharma. So we have to understand this textual outline so that it would be able to clarify our understanding of the structure, and this structure is composed by Mipa Rinpoche. We've already studied from whom we should listen to the Dharma, where we have covered the importance of relying on a virtuous spiritual friend and part ways from the negative companions and influences. Now let's look at the different ways of listening. The first one talks about the way that the teacher would give the teachings of the Dharma, and then the second one is the way that disciples should listen to the Dharma. In terms of the way of giving the Dharma teaching, it has two aspects. The first one is the brief explanation and then extensive explanation. Now let's look at the first one. Over here it says that after parting ways from the negative companions, one should strive to rely on virtuous spiritual teacher, from whom one should give rise to wisdom of hearing, because it is the foundation of liberation. This verse pointed out the importance of choosing the teacher where we can listen to the Dharma. We can choose to listen to the Dharma from a virtuous spiritual teacher and choose to not to listen to the Dharma teachings from a negative or a vice spiritual teacher. And how to distinguish whether a teacher is virtuous or not, we have already studied that in the previous two classes. And then over here it talks about how to listen to the Dharma teachings, which then is divided into two parts: how the teacher gives the Dharma teaching and then how the disciple would listen to the Dharma teaching. Since we've already parted from the vice spiritual teachers, and rely on the true spiritual teacher, the genuine and virtuous spiritual teacher. In front of such a qualified virtuous spiritual teacher, we have to listen to the Dharma teaching so that we can give rise to the wisdom of study. The wisdom of study. Why do we need the wisdom of study? It is because we seek for liberation. If we long for liberation, we have to listen to the Dharma teachings. To rely on a spiritual teacher doesn't mean that you would travel with this teacher to all different places and then have different pilgrimage visits to different countries and different places and take tours with the spiritual teacher. Nor is it to rely on the spiritual teacher by making service or provide service to the spiritual teacher, to fetch water, cook, and all kinds of things like such, nor to provide service to the spiritual teacher by providing massage and so on and so forth. It is not to provide offerings to the spiritual teacher neither. The intention that we have to rely on the spiritual teacher is to seek liberation. And then the foundation, the nature of liberation, what is it? Previously in our class, where we quoted Pontsog Rinpoche, he said that the foundation of liberation is pure precept, and then the path is listening and contemplation. The final action is to diligently engage in practice, which would lead to the action of benefiting sentient beings. This is such a crucial step-by-step guidance. We have to have the foundation of precepts, because it is said that the precepts is just like the ground, which is the foundation of all the merits. According to Abhidharma, it also says that to uphold precepts and give rise to the wisdom of study and contemplation, then engage in diligent practice. Pontsog Rinpoche quoted this previously. And over here, Longchenpa, Venerable Longchenpa also used these two quotations together. The great masters of the past often would quote these two together, so we can see that their ways of guiding us onto the path of liberation are very similar. When we first started the path, we need to rely on a virtuous spiritual teacher, a qualified teacher, and then part ways from the negative influence. And then we need to purify our precepts. On top of that, purified the pure observing of the precepts as a foundation, we can engage in the study, contemplation, and practice. Without the pure precepts, then it is without a foundation. It is just like building a tall high-riser on top of ice. It is not solid, and it will collapse at any time, so it is really quite meaningless. If we can build the foundation properly and then listen and contemplate and then practice, this is the swift path to lead us to liberation. According to Tattva Siddhi, it says that if we were to listen to if we were to be immersed in the Dharma of peace and constantly familiarize ourselves with the listening and contemplation and chanting, reading, as well as contemplation of it in such a way, the liberation is not far away for this practitioner. For genuine practitioners, there are the type of practitioners that would familiarize him or herself with the Dharma teaching despite the busy work and the busy offering of their service to the Sangha. They would not give up on their own practice. They would continuously to engage in study and contemplation of the Dharma themselves. They would not give up in any of those aspects. This is quite crucial. I think nowadays we are over here staying in Larungar. We have such a wonderful environment that creates such an atmosphere for you to listen and contemplate the Dharma. If you don't, then not only others but yourself would feel it is not appropriate to stay in Larungar. But let's just imagine for a second, if we were to leave Larungar, are you going to still listen to the Dharma teachings? Are you still going to be so self-disciplined and receive the Dharma teachings continuously? Because over here, many of you have continuously receiving the Dharma teachings for a decade or 2 decades, and this kinds of listening and contemplation is quite unique and quite important and meaningful. Nowadays, we have the methods, all kinds of skillful means for you to receive the Dharma teaching through internet, or you can download it and then you can listen to it again and again and receive the Dharma teaching completely. This is quite meritorious. According to the Sutra of Right Mindfulness, it says that the merit of listening to the Dharma is the most supreme, which could lead us out of the samsara of birth and death. Nowadays, all of you who are here, I think you definitely have accumulated a great amount of meritorious deeds because you are listening to the Dharma teachings every single day. and you probably would listen to many different classes every single day. And in the evening, there is this habitual tendency of still feeling like you're listening to the Dharma teachings. You would receive different teachings from Khenpos and Khenmos, and sometimes listening to the audio tapes, and those kinds of sounds of Dharma would definitely plant a virtuous seed in your alaya. So we're quite fortunate, and it's very difficult to say if we will have the same kinds of fortunate opportunities in the future. That is why I have been quite diligent in giving teachings this year compared to the past few years, that is, because I don't know how the future will be for the Dharma teachings. Maybe the opportunities of listening to the correct Dharma teachings would be more and more rare in the future. So I am trying my best to give more teachings as possible, and I am trying my very best to create such opportunities to give Dharma teachings as well. In the past few years, I have been giving teachings on every Mondays and Tuesdays, and then we'll take the Wednesday off, and then Thursday and Friday. So 4 classes per week. It is just like 2 days of fishing and 2 days of netting. But this year, I am teaching 6 classes a week. Other than Sunday, our whole Sangha over here are truly engaging in steady contemplation and practice. And I am so grateful, because if you don't come to the shrine hall to listen to my teaching, then I would not be able to give teaching in an empty shrine hall either. So I'm quite grateful. Many people nowadays, out of various reasons, especially because of the pandemic, it is not very convenient in various aspects to come into the shrine hall to listen to the teaching. But now we have only a permission to very limited numbers of people to enter into the shrine hall and attend the teachings. I presume such a situation will last until the mid of October, and before that there's nothing else that we can do. So I really hope that you would just stay at home and listen to the classes, because we are studying it together at the same time, and the blessings and merits would be the same. Also, you would save the time of traveling back and forth, which is also a great way of utilizing your time. So this temporary requirement for all of you is as such, and after a short period of time, maybe when we have more freedom and it's more convenient for you to come in and listen to the teachings, I will make such an announcement. But for now, since we still have so many elements of uncertainties, I would ask you to cope with it. I am also trying my best, including trying my best in preparation of classes and so on. And maybe because of my diligence in preparation and various reasons, I think it's been quite smoothly. It's been going quite smoothly for a period of time. But we need to recognize that the chances of listening to Dharma is indeed very difficult to have, very difficult to gain such opportunities. A little while ago, I invited my 2 sisters to have tea together. I have 3 sisters, as you know, one of whom live in the lay practitioners center over here in Larungar, and then the 2 of them live in the lay practitioners center in my hometown. I was having tea with my younger sister, and I asked her how her classes were going, and she told me that she listens to classes very often nowadays because the Khenpo would give them teachings on words of my perfect teacher. When I asked her how it was, and she said, well, in the past, she would only attend Dharma teachings once or twice a year whenever there are teachers giving classes during the Dharma assemblies, which only happens once or twice a year. But nowadays, she would be able to receive more classes while staying at the lay practitioner center over here. So I said, well, that's very good. You've calculated the benefits quite well. I think nowadays, all of you who are sitting here, you at least have such opportunity to listen to Dharma classes every day. If you were to stay in a city, or even if you were to stay in some monasteries, you would probably stay and listen to classes 1 or 2 times a year, or only a few times within a year. And considering that the opportunities of inviting teachers to give empowerments or classes is getting harder and harder, so it is really not that difficult. Therefore, I really hope that you would give rise to the eagerness to listen to the Dharma and then generate great respect to the Dharma. This is quite important. Now let's look at the second aspect, which talks about the merit of giving the Dharma teaching and the object of, or the audience of receiving Dharma teaching, as well as how to give the Dharma teachings. Here in the verse, it says that endowed with 10 meritorious qualities of extensive listening, the Supreme Teacher and the students with auspicious connections could fully expound the subtle Dharma, begins with observation of the capacity of disciples. So what it means is that as the teacher usually has to be endowed with the merits of extensive listening, the kinds of teacher that fits into qualification of being a virtuous teacher needs the 10 types of qualities, meritorious qualities, that is. Such kind of teacher would expound the subtle Dharma to the disciple, the fortunate disciples. But in order to expound such subtle and vast and wondrous Dharma to the fortunate disciple, the teacher has to make the observation of the capacity of the disciple. What kind of vessel is this disciple? Is the student of the vessel of Sutrayana or of Vajrayana? Is the disciple of the capacity to receive the easy Dharma teachings or deep and profound Dharma teachings? Now let's look at the 10 types of meritorious qualities. Previously, we have already studied the 10 types of vice qualities, and over here the 10 types of virtuous qualities, which is the reversal of the vice qualities. So we need to know that this teacher has to understand and know the quality, know the capacity of the disciple. This is the first one. And then the second one points out that the teacher should not be a foolish one that is ignorant of all the phenomenal world or the teachings. Let it be Sutrayana or Vajrayana or all kinds of knowledge. The teacher has to be very thorough and have thoroughly understanding of all of that. Now the third one is eloquent. Eloquent in terms of speech. The teacher should be able to speak English, Japanese, Korean, Arabic, or the ethnic languages such as the Uyghur and Mongolian, Tibetan language. Even in terms of Tibetan language, there are the different dialects within the Tibetan language, the language of the nomads, the language of farmers, the Digas language, and the Gardis language. Which reminded me that when I was attending the normal school, there are a few different people from different areas that speaks Gardze dialect from Drago area and dialects, and then the ones from Nyaron, and it seems that we can't really understand each other. But it is only after a month or two we started understand each other through hearing. But but we can't speak of others' dialects. It is probably similar to people who speak Hong-Kongese and people who speak Mandarin. It's very difficult for you to understand each other and speak each other's dialects. So over here it points out that the teacher would be better to be quite eloquent in the language. It would be better for the teacher to be very skilled at using the language and would be able to express themselves clearly, let it be Chinese or Mongolian or Tibetan language. People can be very different in terms of the ability of using their language. There are the ones that can speak and the ones that cannot express their understanding. The third one is that the fourth one is that the teacher should not only focus on the benefits that they will receive, because at the time of giving Dharma teaching, the teacher should not pay attention to the benefits. The fifth one is not miserly in terms of giving the pithy instructions of the correct Dharma. If you remember the story of the disciple of the Buddha, Sudipantaka, he was born as a foolish person because in his previous life he was very miserly in terms of giving the Dharma teachings and the pithy instructions of Dharma teachings. Nowadays, I think people are quite miserly in terms of sharing their secrets, especially if it's related to commerce and to merchants. But unless those pithy instructions are illicit, or the pithy instructions are too secret, such as the Vajrayana pithy instructions that cannot be shared. But I think as a teacher, one should definitely share the Dharma teachings with the disciples. On top of that, the teacher should not be greedy to gain fame nor any kinds of benefits. The next one also talks about the teacher should not be tiresome when it comes to benefiting sentient beings. There are teachers, after encountering some little obstacle, they would give up on teaching and would talk about giving up. After looking at the disciples' inappropriate actions, some teachers would be quite tiresome in teaching. So I think the teacher definitely has to be quite strong and persevere in terms of giving teachings. I think lots of our Khenpos and Khenpos over here are doing quite well. They've been teaching for 1 or 2 decades. And whatever things would happen, they would be able to handle it and not get tired, nor generate the mind of arrogance nor jealousy. Now, the 10th one is not being stingy to the Dharma, which is a little bit similar to the previous one. When I personally encounter some profound teachings, I would love to share with others. It is similar to a group of friends. After one of them enjoyed some delicious meal, would be very eager to share with other friends. Similarly, I was very eager to share the wonderful teachings, such as the wish-fulfilling Treasury, when I was translating it. Now we've completed expounding on the 10 qualities, which is also expounded in the Sutra of Condensing the Correct Dharma. The 10 qualities was also expounded in that sutra. If you were to read into it, that would be really wonderful. So at the time when you have encountered a disciple that seeks for liberation, longing for liberation, also has a great merit and has an upright mind or is endowed with dignity, then in front of such kind of audience, such kind of Dharma vessel, then you can give teaching to that disciple. But before you give the teaching, it would be the best for you to make the observation of this Dharma vessel. You shouldn't give teachings just very hastily. According to the Samadhi Raja Sutra, it also states the similar teaching. It says that you should make the observation of the disciple and do not not hastily just give the Dharma teaching. You have to first make the observation whether the disciple is of a worthy Dharma vessel or not. After making such discernment and observation, if the disciple did not request the Dharma teaching but is a worthy Dharma vessel, then you could give the Dharma teaching still to this particular disciple. You could say that, you come here, I will give you some Dharma teaching, would you like to listen to it? And then if the disciple loves to listen to it, then you can give teachings. Though, according to some sutras, that if the disciple do not request the Dharma teaching from the teacher, then it is not necessary for you to give the teaching. According to the sutra, it says that the sentient beings should request for the Dharma teachings, and then the Dharma teacher should expound the Dharma. But the perspective could be different according to different sutras. There are the type of disciples that's very honest and have lots of faith, but they're not really eloquent and not very good at presenting themselves and request the teachings. I, for example, visited places such as Gyeongsang, where the people were very honest and very trustworthy, but at the same time, they're rather not very good at request the teachings. And then I offered the teachings to them, and they were very happy to receive the teachings. And in some ways, they finally realized that that's what they should have done. But of course, there are people with hidden agendas at the time of requesting Dharma from you. For example, nowadays, people would come to you while asking others to take photos of you giving them Dharma teachings. Or if someone were to request a teaching with great arrogance and without respect. In those kinds of situations, you should not give them the Dharma teachings. As a qualified spiritual teacher, you should make observation of the Dharma vessel. And now, in the next verse, it says that just as how the seniors and the youth would eat different foods, the Dharma teaching that one should bestow to different people should also be different. Over here it says one should make the observation of the Dharma vessel just as how the newborn infants would eat different food than that of the adults. The infants cannot eat anything solid because their body is not fully matured yet. If we were to give infants those solid food and coarse food that the adults eat, then their body cannot digest it, and the food will not be beneficial to nourish their body either. I'm not sure about what the babies would eat in China mainland, but in Tibet, what we do is that at the beginning there was the milk, and then slowly with the growth of the infant, the mother would put some very refined tsampa in it. By feeding the baby little by little, the child would be able to get accustomed to solid food. And the mother is usually very skilled at making observation of the growth of the child and very aware of what should be fed to the child or not. In Tibet, the most popular food to feed the babies are milk. When I was little, it is not that we can drink as much milk as we want because the yaks belong to the commune. To each of the family, there is only the property of 1 or 2 yaks. When I was writing my biography, I wrote a little bit in it. I remember that after my mother enters into the tent from outside, after she milked the yak, my younger brother and younger sister and I would stand right in the tent and waiting for her with a bowl in our hands, just like a beggar waiting for food. And then my mother would give each of the child a little bit of milk. And after drinking that milk, we truly felt it was drinking the nectar from the celestial realm. Because at that time, the food was indeed very difficult to gain. We cannot eat or drink as much as we want. If we were to do that, then how could we get the ghee or cheese? And what can we do to, what can we offer to the guests if there are guests visiting? There are lots of practical problems that we need to consider. After children started growing up and reaching the senior age, at that time, even if the food doesn't have some wonderful flavors, as long as they're tender and soft to chew on, then they would enjoy it. Because at that time, the taste is no longer that crucial. It is the softness of the food, since many people would lose their teeth. But nowadays, since there are dentures, so it seems that the seniors' teeth are wider than when they were young. Today I'm not going to be too explicit on the ghee, so I'm not going to speak too much on the butter. You don't have to worry anymore. Whenever I talk about food and whenever I talk about butter, that practitioner gets a little bit nervous. Through this example, we understand that such solid and coarse food are not the appropriate food for babies, for infants, for the same reason. For the same reason as how seniors and adults would have different food than the infants, then the Dharma teaching should also be taught differently to the sentient beings of different capacities. How do we understand this? It is to say that for beginners, we should not give them teachings on the most highest realization of the Zen teaching or of the Madhyamika teaching or of the Maha-Arti teaching. Rather, you should give the beginners teachings on the faults of samsara, sufferings of samsara, and the merits of attaining liberation. Or the human life is impermanent and it is difficult to gain the favorable conditions, as well as the truth of karma causes conditions, so that the beginners would be able to slowly generate the mind of renunciation. And then that's when you can give them teachings on bodhicitta, as well as the nature of everything is of empty. So slowly you would be able to plant the seeds in them. And of course, for the ones with low capacity, you can give them teachings of Shravakayana's teachings or the Paticca Buddha's teachings. And to the ones with the middling capacity, you can give them teachings on the Sutrayana. And then for the ones with the sharp capacity, you can give them teachings on the Vajrayana. Or you can give them teachings according to the 9 vehicles. To the low capacity, to the ones with the low capacities, you can give them teachings on the Shravaka, Pratika, and Bodhisattvayana's teachings. And for the middling capacity, you can give them teachings on the Charya Yoga and Kriya. Also, for the ones with the highest or the sharpest capacity, we can then give them teachings on the Mahayoga, Nuyoga, and Ati Yoga. Or if you were to give them teachings according to the different levels of the Chinese Buddhism, you can give them teachings accordingly as well. If some people has the capacity of receiving Pure Land school, then you can give them Pure Land teachings. And if they have the capacity to receive the Zen teachings, then you can give them teachings on Zen teachings or the Tiantai or the Vajrayana. In general, we should not expound all the teachings in a very short period of time. According to the Bodhisattva Charyavatara, it says that one should not give teachings to the ones with shallow wisdom. So we should not give the profound teachings to the ones with very shallow wisdom, because that would destroy the vessel. It is said that the milk of a lion cannot be placed in a mundane vessel because it will break the vessel. It is only the gold vessel that can be worthy to put the milk of the lion. So the profound teachings cannot be taught to the mundane people, rather should be taught to the sharp facultied practitioners. As teachers, how should we make the observations? Venerable Longchenpa stated that there are different types of teachers. The high-capacity teacher, the teacher of the teachers that endowed with the capacity to make observations of disciples through miraculous penetrations, just like Milarepa or the sixth patriarch. At the time of making observation of the disciples, they would be able to see their connections for lifetimes. Also, though Pontsuk Rinpoche never said that he has those miraculous penetrations, but we can see that all of the disciples that Pontsuk Rinpoche paid close attention to had then later exhibited great effort and abilities in the activity of propagating the Dharma and benefiting sentient beings. So we can see that if the teacher were to be of the highest capacity, then they would be able to make observation through their miraculous penetrations. And then, if the teacher were not to have such kinds of miraculous penetrations, the teacher should still be able to make observation of the disciples through contacting the disciples and by spending some time with the disciples. Even if you were not to do so, if the teacher were to be of a lower capacity teacher, then at least he should be able to ask the others to give some feedback about the disciples to make the discernment whether the disciple is worthy vessel or not. Pontsuk Rinpoche, in fact, would use all of the stated above methods. Sometimes he would ask how a person is, and sometimes he would use other ways to make observation as well. I also wrote down some of them in my book. Pontsuk Rinpoche really liked to ask what this person's background is and where he studied the Dharma, and whether this disciple observed the pure precepts, and whether this disciple was diligent in the study and contemplation, and is this disciple quite upright or has a good personality and a character? So he would ask those kinds of questions. The reason of getting to know the disposition of the disciples is because the different types of sentient beings should be tamed through different Dharma teachings and methods. If you were to only use one particular method to tame different beings, it would not be very beneficial. Though maybe at the beginning you feel that it could be beneficial, such Dharma teaching could be just like a poison to poison the others. Conventionally speaking, usually milk would be beneficial for the cows and for the calves. However, to the poisonous snakes, they're terrified of milk. That is why the Buddha gives different teachings to different sentient beings. It is said that the Buddha had given the 84,000 dharmas to different sentient beings, and some stated 80,000 different dharmas. The Buddha did not use only one particular method to expound the Dharma. Rather, he used various ways. You should contemplate about the reason why the Buddha did not give the Dharma teaching at the very beginning. For example, right now we're studying the Mahāti teaching, which could resolve all of the problems of sentient beings. If the Buddha were to only give the teaching of the Mahāti Dharma or the Dharma teaching of chanting the name of Buddha, would that be beneficial to everyone? I had already explained this particular point of view to respond to other people's doubts. On one hand, to practice and study the Pure Land school of Buddhism and to fully and only engage in that practice, that would be great. But on the other, this Dharma teaching, though, is extremely supreme. We should not expel the other Dharma teachings, the other methods. We should not say that this is the only Dharma that's really supreme. If you were to say that this is the only Dharma teaching that's supreme, then why did the Buddha turn the Dharma wheels for so many times? Why would the Dharma give different Dharma teachings from different levels and different perspectives? Are you saying that it is not necessary for the Buddha to give the different Dharma teachings then? So nowadays, though some people may feel that as long as I recognize the nature of my mind, as long as I have attained this awareness, then I'm good. I don't need to study and contemplate anymore. And anything else, anything other than that is meaningless. All I need to do is to abide and practice, that's all. Or, according to some mainland Dharma teachers, they would say that all you need to do is practice meditation. All the other things are simply the path of Mara. You don't need to study at all. Or, in Tibet, there are the teachers that would claim all you need to do is to study Mahāti and then abide in that insight would be enough. Other than abiding in the insight of Mahāti, then the other Dharma teachings are simply wrong Dharma teachings. But these claims are simply wrong because the Buddha, if the Buddha were to claim that only one particular Dharma is enough, then why would the Buddha give teachings on the other Dharma teachings? If we were to only recognize one particular insight, for example, recognizing the nature of your mind or recognizing awareness, you still need to, even after you recognize it, you still need to listen and contemplate, because the recognition of it is not that easy. When we studied the way of entering great vehicle, we studied that there are so many wrong ways to abide in Mahāti. If you were to simply practice abiding, then how would you know your practice is the correct practice without knowing what are the false paths and what are the faults of not recognizing the nature of your mind or recognizing awareness? When we practice Guru Yoga, for example, if you do not understand how to practice Guru Yoga, according to different methods and different schools, then how would you be able to engage in the actual practice? Many people would claim that I am simply practicing, I am engaging in the actual practice, but you are listening and study. Your Dharma, listening and study, is the kind of Dharma that still relies on conceptual mind. But my practice is truly the wisdom Dharma. Of course, if you can abide in such a state of wisdom, I truly rejoice. But according to Beacon of Certainty, which was also quoted by Ponsokpo Rinpoche, it is stated that the great masters of India and Tibet would practice diligently for a long time to attain the realization. But sadly, the foolish ones think that they can grasp the true meaning in one instant. For such reason, I also doubt the so-called abiding in the wisdom state as well. Nowadays, many people would ask me to give them pith instructions. They would use other ways to say it: pith instructions, pointing out instructions, toga instructions. And they would claim that if you don't give me the pith instruction, I don't want to stay here anymore. Well, the pith instructions, if I were to give you this, I could. I can give you the direct pointing out. There's the brass vessel, gold vessel, and silver vessel, one would be giving the direct pointing out through a little vessel. But without study and contemplation, you would not be able to attain any realization. So Venerable Longchenpa over here in his Treasury of Dharmadhatu stated quite clearly, let it be Mahāti or Zen practice, there are systematic approaches in the study, contemplation, and actual practice. Without study, it is indeed quite difficult for us to enter into the profundity of the Dharma by our own wisdom. For such reason, we need to find the appropriate teachings to our current state of mind and to our current capacity. For example, if you're still a kindergarten student, then the kindergarten classes is the most suitable teaching for you. And for the ones in the middle school, then the middle school classes and curriculum would be the most suitable and profound for you. And the university students would study that of the university curriculum. That would be the most suitable. If the university students were to study that of the kindergarten, then that would be too easy, or vice versa. That would be too difficult. Though currently in the Tibetan Buddhist institutes, there's not a clear division of the step-by-step curriculum, nor to differentiate whether your capacity is of the Sutrayana or of the Vajrayana. However, there is another method for you to make the observation of your own capacity. Venerable Atisha stated that on one hand, we can look at our preferred teachings. Then you would be able to know the kind of capacity you have, as well as the auspicious connections you have to the different types of dharmas. Also, there are people who would request the teacher to give them a dharma teaching just to themselves. I don't think that's necessary either. For example, if there are 50 students in grade 1, and then if you were to simply give one out of the 50 students a pith instruction from the university curriculum, it is not necessarily going to mature the students very quickly. Rather, it would be important for you to study according to the grades that you're in the first grade all the way to the 9th grade, and then you can enter into the middle school or high school, and then enter into the university. Similarly, you can first study the words of my perfect teacher, and then entering the way of Bodhisattva, and then the Buddhist logic. So if you can make such kind of step-by-step progression, then at the time of studying the Tantra, other than some very special cases, I think the majority of you would be able to follow the steps and be benefited from such kinds of system. Nowadays, we also have another curriculum where the opportunity is provided to the sharp capacity to students that they can attain both of the Buddhist logic classes as well as the Madhyamika classes. If you're capable of receiving 2 classes at a time, then that's wonderful. Other than those exceptions, there is no tradition of giving exceptional pith instructions one by one, even from Ponsuk Rinpoche's time, and this is really not our tradition over here. Mostly, Ponsuk Rinpoche would give the pith instructions publicly, and after that, each person, each practitioner, according to their own capacity, their understanding and practice and their insights would be very different. Now we've completed the second textual outline where it talks about the capacity of the audience. Now the next one is the method of giving Dharma teachings. The Dharma teaching according to the step-by-step method, as well as how to give the Dharma teachings. So over here, after we already make the observation of the capacity of the audience, then you should give the teaching in a step-by-step manner. The systematic guidance to provide the Dharma teaching is quite crucial. What is systematic? It is that you should give the Dharma teaching in the way that it is step by step. That is why Venerable Tsongkhapa give teaching on Lam-rim, and Venerable Longchenpa give the Dharma teaching on resting the mind. Also, the teaching of Words of My Perfect Teacher by Patrul Rinpoche, all of these are step-by-step methods of Dharma teachings. So first of all, you need to know the capacity of your disciple and then give the Dharma teaching in a step-by-step method. So what is the merit and quality of giving the step-by-step Dharma teachings? It is quite great. It says that after relying on the step-by-step method of the yanas, the merit would continuously to increase and one would not have fear. One would then have the unmistaken view and practice and would come to the fruition of their insights. So for someone who seeks for liberation, as we've previously stated, the guru would best to make observation of the disciples through miraculous penetration. If not, at least to get to know this disciple through spending time or ask others about their feedback about the disciple. After knowing the capacity of the disciple, then the teacher should give teachings in a step-by-step manner. There are a few different types of step-by-step manner. The first system is that if the teacher is just like a Garuda, then the teacher should give the teachings from up to down, that is without effort. This particular system has been debated about by Mahayana and Kamalashila, where one said that my view is just like a Garuda, and then the other asked, where does the Garuda take off? So this particular method would be bestowed, this particular Dharma teaching would be more targeted to the kind of disciples with foundations already. To further prove this particular method, according to the ornaments of Madhyamika, it stated that the teacher should expound on emptiness and then on compassion. There is the quotation to prove it as well. And then there's another type of teaching that follows the method just as how a monkey would climb a tree from bottom to up. And then there is the kind of disciple that would be able to attain sudden realization. Whichever method, whichever way it is, if you were to expound the Mahayana Dharma teaching to the fortunate students, it would be crucial to understand the appropriate steps. If one were to receive the Dharma teachings through the appropriate steps, then the merit as well as the steady contemplation and practice would further increase. The understanding of the profound Dharma as well as the wisdom of no self would help one not to have any fear. Since the view and action would be unmistaken, then the action would naturally follow the view, because at first you would develop the correct view and your action would follow the view. The view and actions are complementary to each other. According to Nagarjuna's view, according to our teaching, it says that we should follow the view of Nagarjuna and the actions of Bodhisattva. In such a way, it would be all harmonious. So if we can practice in such a way, we would be very successful. This is the teaching that's expounded by Venerable Longchenpa. And then over here, Longchenpa expounded the faults of not doing so. It says that if one were not to give teachings in such a way, then there are infinite faults. The front and the back, as well as top and down, that is parted from the step-by-step system. system would lead to losing of the key track of Buddhism, also would lead to shallow wisdom, fear, wrong view, and abandonment, not knowing the systematic path and not coming to in-depth realization. Despite the actions of virtuous dharma that is conditioned to have the excessive increase and decrease as causes, and then misunderstanding causes inspiration, not knowing what to adapt and what to abandon, and to give up on the compassionate aspiration of Mahayana. Over here, there are 9 main faults that's related to not following a systematic step of giving Dharma teachings. The systematic approach of studying Dharma is really crucial. If you do not follow such steps, then there are the infinite kinds of faults that could be associated with it. The first one is to lose the key track of the Dharma, because the Dharma would give teaching systematically to different sentient beings of different dispositions. If you were to receive a direct pointing out without any foundation, then that could lead to the great faults, and you would probably lose the whole Dharma teaching's key points. Let it be the Sutrayana or Vajrayana. So this is the first one. The second one is that for the shallow wisdomed ones, at the time of engaging in practice without a foundation, then one would not be able to enter into the actual teaching. One would not be able to practice the Dharma, and then one would get quite terrified and even generated a wrong view. This is the second aspect. And the third one, if you do not practice according to the system, you would not understand the Dharma properly. And then the fourth one is not attaining the profound realization. Without the systematic approach of the Dharma, then all of your understanding is quite halfway, not completely delve into the profundity of the Dharma, such as the insights of Madhyamika. If you were to approach the insights of Madhyamika step by step, then that is quite fortunate of you, just like many of us over here. Maybe you don't realize how fortunate you are yet, but in your future times, if you were to have some time to engage in actual practice in your later years, even after you part from Larongar, wherever you are, you would be able to recognize the precious teachings that you've received here. Definitely could make you feel quite settled and confident of your own insights and your practice. That's how we would feel whenever and wherever we go. I feel quite comfortable that I have already encountered the great Dharma teachings and such wonderful teacher, and for that reason I feel quite fortunate. The fifth one is that if you do not practice according to the systematic approach, then you would despise those conditioned virtuous deeds, such as prostration and using the prayer wheels and so on and so forth. Many people would mistakenly thinking that, are you selling those prayer wheels? But we don't need to make a business out of it. You couldn't be more wrong. Nowadays, there are lots of people on the internet or in social media. They would claim that there is no past and future lives and so on and so forth. Those are definitely quite horrifying. Now, the sixth one is that without the systematic approach of practice, one would slander and one would have excessive increase or decrease. And that means you would claim what is not existent as existent, what is existent as not existent. So the seventh is not understanding causes and differentiation, not knowing what to adapt and what to abandon. And then to mistaken the teachings on karma, not knowing what to plant as seeds and what's the fruition to reap. The eighth one is not knowing, which is ignorance. Not knowing anything is indeed quite pitiful. The ninth one is that if you do not practice according to the systematic step, then you're simply given up on the Mahayana teaching and given up on the great compassionate aspiration, which would lead to the abandonment of all the merits of Mahayana. So it is crucial for us to practice systematically. Making the observation of your audience vessel is so crucial. According to the Vaipoya 10 Wheels Sutra, the wise ones at the time of practicing the generosity of Dharma is expounding of the three yanas, so that the unworthy vessel would not slander the Dharma. It is to say, one should not give the profound teaching to the unworthy vessel, because the unworthy vessel would slander the Dharma teaching if not understood. At the time of giving the Dharma teachings, there are people who would follow the steps of the 6 paramitas or some other methods, so that the sentient beings would be able to enjoy at least one particular method of the Dharma teaching. The true Dharma teacher, according to the Mahaprajna Paramita Shastra, it says that the Bodhisattvas abide in the true truth would give the teachings to the sentient beings. At the time of the Bodhisattvas give Dharma teachings, they would give teachings of the true truth. Not only they would talk about emptiness as well as existence, they would not only talk about only emptiness or only existence. So it points out that the Bodhisattvas, after studying the true truth at the time of giving Dharma teachings to the others, they're extremely skillful. They would not say something is empty nor not empty. They would answer it from 2 aspects. They would say that this is how you can understand it from 2 aspects. From the ultimate truth, from that perspective, it is empty. From the conventional point of view, all the phenomena is existent, right? That is how a skillful bodhisattva would give the Dharma teaching. So by now, we have expounded on the importance of the systematic approach of giving the Dharma teaching.